Thank you, Brother Gate, and I appreciate the kind words. I do, like Wayne and like Brother Tim. Now, I saw Tim this morning at breakfast, and it was really the first opportunity I had to talk to him about the topic. And then Brother Wayne, I did call him on the onset after I reread my sermon topic. I thought it was the 10th through the 14th century BC, and I was excited. That's Goliath, and it's all right. I can work something out there. So part of this lesson is going to be dealing with remember, because we do need to remember to read carefully what the outline or what the invitation says as far as what's to be done. Even listen closer, because when Guyton called me, Jerry was sitting in the background there, and he said, "Would you do this? We think you do a good job." "Oh yeah, sure." And then I listened a little more closely afterwards, and then the packet came in the mail, and oh man, what have you done? The fact that I did not know a lot about this period of time as far as Judaism was one of those things that really enlightened me in this study. It's probably one of the last ones to get an outline in, or came very close to being the last one. Every time the phone would ring, I just knew it was Guyton, where's the outline? And I just did not, it wasn't that I didn't want to get it done. I was like Wayne when he and I talked. We were having a hard time getting our minds around what exactly we were going to say. Wayne did promise me, or kind of sort of promised me, he's not here right now, he had to head back home, but he did kind of tell me, he said, "Look, I've got Adam looking up some information. If he runs across something for you, I'll send it to you." Another week went by. Never showed up. I did finally receive the phone call, Rick. There just wasn't anything there. And I started looking for information on the internet, trying to get some sort of references and all, and trying to track down things. I did find out the library at University of Tennessee at Martin had quite a few books there, and I was able to go there, and some of the references on the back of the outline there will, if you want to go into this in more detail, will help you to find more things, because even as far along as this morning and yesterday, I was still finding little bits and pieces and caveats to try to fill in some of the blanks here. And it's just, as you get going and the more time you spend, it's a little bit easier to do that. When I saw the book, Jared had a copy of the outline book, and I saw it on Saturday, and I was looking at Wayne's first, and I went to Tim's, and I was kind of surprised that we all three had kind of the same type of an outline or a format going by the years there, the centuries, and what those period of years are. I know that history is you love it or you hate it. I love history. I don't like remembering dates. I don't like having to be tested on what period of time was this. I don't mind looking at a reference, and that's why in the first part of my outline there, you'll see some things, some highlights of things that went on during that period of time. And as you go through some of those things, you'll notice that those historical things are things that actually have an effect upon us even yet today, because things that were done back then still carry on through. And it kind of reminds me of what the Apostle Peter had to say, that when he wrote to the brethren there in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 1, he says, I want to stir up your mind, your pure minds, by way of remembrance. So we know that memory and remembering things is a very vital part of our life as a Christian, that we need to oftentimes go back and study and rehash and relook at certain things. And because of that period of time, there is no real scriptural references to go back and fall back on. And so we're looking at secular history. We're looking at things that others have said about that period of time. A lot of it is slanted toward, well, how great it was. But there's also some things that I ran across that showed that there was a lot of things going on that shouldn't have been going on. The fact that there was a lot of compromising going on between the Christians and when I say Christian, I'm talking about the Catholic Church, and between the Muslims and between the Jews. That there was a lot of interaction amongst them, and some had to do certain things in order to survive, and we got a couple things to say about that as we go on. When we think about the events that went on there, the timeline for this period of time, you notice that in the 10th century there, I've only got a couple things in there. This what caught my attention was the high Jewish courtiers. They joined the Muslim court in Spain. Here's the Jews and Muslims together now. unlike what's going on today. We see nothing but fighting and things going on today. We notice also that the yeshivas, or these places of higher learning, schools that had, there was one created in Spain. The 11th century, that started the Golden Age in Spain. In Egypt, the Jews were persecuted. Many had to flee to the Byzantine Empire or Yemen in 1020. Jews allowed into England. And I never realized that they had a problem going from place to place. I guess these are some of the surprises that I noticed and saw. The school of Rashi takes root in northern France in 1070. Christians expand rule in Spain, and they outlaw Judaism, or Judaism. The first Crusades come in, and in the Crusades, those are things that, growing up, you used to hear about the sword fighting and all those things, but the Crusades is more on the religious background of it. And I know there's a lesson coming up, so I'm going to shy away from saying too much about the Crusades, but the very first Crusade, in which a lot of Jews were massacred in Europe. The Crusaders, they captured Jerusalem, massacred Muslims and Jewish residents. The 12th century, first recorded blood libel of North England. And that was an interesting story, too, about how that the Jews back in that day and time were accused of actually killing boys and using their blood in the Passover feast. And how these things perpetrated and went into some other things. That first recorded case is out there. The fellow's name was William, by the way, who had been taken. And the fact of the matter is they didn't know exactly who did this. The Jews were kind of charged with that crime, but nothing could be proven about that. The Second Crusade renewed the vengeance targeting Jews. The Rabbinau, Tam, and Rashman initiate the first rabbinical synod of Ashkenaz in France and Germany. Jews established a synagogue in Kaifeng, China. And that was the first I'd ever heard of a synagogue of the Jews in China, for crying out loud. I mean, just these different topics, these different facts, and as you start studying some of these things, you get sidetracked, or at least I do. You start finding this or that, and you start chasing that rabbit, if you will, and then you have to be brought back to, well, here's my focus. I got to keep on track here. And so there's a couple folks that we're going to talk about here a little bit later on. Moses Maimonides. And I had a hard time pronouncing that name. And I was like Wayne, you get that little application there that you can put in the name and it'll pronounce it for you. So it's Maimonides rather. And he was a great Jewish author, one that they really counted on. In fact, they still do today, and we're going to speak of him. He finished or completed the Mishnah Torah that he was writing. The Muslims, they reconquered Jerusalem. The Jews are invited to return in 1187 AD. Jews facing death by angry mobs during the Third Crusade take their own lives in York, England. The 13th century, 300 Western European rabbis answered Saladin's call to return to Jerusalem. The first Jewish community in Switzerland established in Basel in 1213. The Fourth Church Lateran Council promotes more intense anti-Jewish legislation. A French rabbi bans Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed. And this is another book that this Moses Maimonides, and I'm going to use his other name that most of them call him by, was Rambam. And I think of Bam Bam when I read that term, but that's what they lovingly called him, that Moses Maimonides. They called him Rambam. And so he was a writer, and we're going to look at some of that here in just a moment as well. The Christian king of Aragon grants a charter of rights for the Jews in 1239. Paris disputations followed by the burning of the Talmud. And, the burning of this holy book of the Jews was something that was unheard of. The first blood libel in Spain, we'll talk about more of that. The Barcelona disputation, Polish Jewish community inaugurated with the first charter of rights in 1246. And that was further expanded in 1333. The Jews expelled from Naples' kingdom of southern Italy. England expels its Jews in 1290. Muslims drive Crusaders out of the land of Israel in 1291. The Rheinfleich massacres the Jews in Germany in 1298. In the 14th century, there was a ban on all Jews to study philosophy and science for anyone under the age of 25. Jews of France are expelled in 1306. The Black Death plague strikes Europe. Jews are accused of poisoning wells in 1348 to 49. The Jews expelled from Hungarian communities in 1349 to 1360. The Inquisition forced conversion of Jews and final expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1391 to 1492. And the thing that kind of stuck out in my mind as you read this timeline of events here is that the attacks upon the Jews, the Crusades to help, and they exterminated Jews as well as going after the Muslims. We see that the church, the Catholic Church, they were the enemies of the Jews, and Jews didn't like the Catholics, but yet they commingled for a while there to enable themselves to still be in those areas. You'll notice also in this study that as the Jews were getting wealthy, their craft, the thing that a lot of the folks really liked the Jews was that they were able to make money. They were able to loan money to people. They were great merchants. They had the connections over in Palestine, Egypt, and those areas to bring things in. And the governors and the people of Europe, they loved the fact that they were able to bring these things in and to loan money to these folks, and only to find out that when they started owing too much money, guess what? The Jews need to go. And thus they didn't have to pay their debt. And it was an easy way to accommodate that. During this period of time, there were some major issues that influenced Judaism in that time period. Schools of learning were popping up. These schools of learning were schools that would help these Jews to learn their laws, to learn their teachings. And it was important for them to learn these truths, to come in. These rabbis would establish these yeshivas to further instruct their students. And this was a traditional Jewish school. This was a means by which these rabbis and these teachers could, for lack of a better term, I'd say indoctrinate, to teach their students, to guide them, to get them to know about the Jewish law very well. They would traditionally have studies of the Hebrew Bible. They would have studies dealing with the sacred writings of Judaism, called by the Christians the Old Testament, and comprising the law of the Torah, the prophets, the Haggadah, the books of Ruth, Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. The Tanakh is an acronym for the Torah, the Nevi'im, or the prophets, and Ketuvim of the writings. The Talmud was a set of books consisting of the Mishnah, or the repeated study, the Jerma, the completion, and certain other studies that they would be involved in. And all these writings that they had, a lot of these writings were writings that, as they came about, were writings from years gone by. They would compile all these ideas or these judgments that they'd make, and they would compile them in these books. And then whenever a problem came up, they would refer to those things. And we might call them sort of like commentaries today. Many of the other literatures that they used were literatures to assist them, literatures to guide them, to help in the decision-making that needed to go on during that period of time. Now, during this medieval period of time, from 950 to 1750, and that goes beyond my scope here, but there were two major branches of thought there as far as Judaism was considered. There was the Ashkenaz, or the Franco-German group, and they traced their lineage, or they traced their cultural affiliation to Italy and Palestine. And so the things that they taught were based on their location, based upon where they lived at that time, as well as what was said before from their homeland as they came over from that place. They drew their school texts and values and judgments from the Talmud and the Midrash. And the Midrash was simply a literature that contained judgments, that contained commentary, contained comments on things that had already been spoken of regarding the Torah, the Hebrew Bible. They would take this information and they would utilize this in teaching the students. This is how we need to go. This is what we need to do. This is the decisions that we have to follow. And unfortunately, as time would go on, they would actually interject some of their own thought processes involved in those things. Kind of sounds familiar today, doesn't it? See, remembering history, going back in time, learning what others did down through the ages, and you find out that there, as Solomon said, there really is nothing new under the sun, especially when it comes to religion. We know that there was also the Sephardic type, or the Andalusian Spanish group of Jews that lived at that day and time, and they traced their culture or affiliation back to Babylonia, back to that period of time, and from the influence of their respective or immediate locations. So wherever they lived, based on what happened in Babylonia and the teachings they had back then, they would compile them, and here's what we got to do now. You know, we got to change the way in which we think. We got to move on. We got to get in with what the in crowd is doing today. And that's kind of their mindset that they had to accomplish these events. They dwelled mainly in Muslim Spain, and their traditions came to an end when the invasion of Spain took place in 1147 and 48. An observation: not all things were peaceful there wherever they lived in these different countries. In this period of time, regardless of their location or where they dwelled in, there were still these factions that were out there. There was always this constant problem between the Jews, the Muslim, and the Christian. Who would be the one that would call the shots? Who would be the one that would make the decisions on whoever? And sometimes if they made a decision to go against one group, another group would be involved in it as well, and they would be destroyed. In this case, a plight would go out against the Muslims, and the Jews would suffer because of that as well. Because as far as many of the Christians were concerned, they're closely related. Oh, you've got Allah and you've got God. And in their mindset, they're from the same place. They just had a little bit different teaching. And yet we know that there's a big difference between the Muslim law and the Jewish law. The Jews were trying to practice their beliefs. One account that I read dealt with how that sometimes these Jews would convert to being Muslims. And on the outward appearance and in society and around them, they would live as Muslims. But they secretly would start practicing their Judaism. They would in secret go and to do their worshiping to where no one else could see that. Sometimes they would get caught at doing that and would lose their lives. There were these Muslims that they had to constantly contend with, the Christians that they had to constantly contend with. And the fact that one group wouldn't work with another group came into being a problem as well. And the only common ground that the Jew really had with the Christian and with the Muslim was the wealth, their merchandising, their ability to make money, their ability to import things and to sell things and to be able to help others to borrow money. During this time period, there were some great influences. And I mentioned in there about the Crusades, and that's one lesson that I'm looking forward to hearing yet today or in this lectureship series. But when we think about the blood libels, the false charges that were made against the Jews, that they would take this bread, or they would take these children, that they would slay them, that they would take their blood, that they would use them. A convert from Judaism charged that every year Jews kidnapped or brought a Christian child and killed him in a reenactment of the crucifixion in order to mock Christianity. A lot of people thought that way, but it didn't indicate or say that there was a lot of people that truly actually believed some of that. Jews used the victim's blood, baking that matzah, or the unleavened bread that they used in the Passover. When they'd have that Passover feast, they said that bread that they used contained the blood of that Gentile child. And I can't imagine anybody doing such as that. I mean, that just goes beyond my wildest imagination, that they would take the blood of a human and mix it in the dough to make this Passover bread, just so that they could mock the crucifixion. I mentioned the first documented case of this was that of a fellow by the name of William. It happened in 1144 in Warwick, England, where a boy named William disappeared shortly before Easter. They finally found his body. The body was mutilated, and there was a family of Jews that were originally became charged with that crime, or at least they were accused of that crime. The Jewish community suffered because of this. It came to a boiling point, but someone kept it from happening, kept them from taking that family. No one actually ended up being fully charged, but he came very close to being canonized by the church. He wasn't, but they wanted to make him into a saint, that young boy that lost his life. What happened actually, no one really knows. But yet, the Jews got the blame for that. I can't imagine, well, I can. We know about the Lord's church being accused of things that didn't happen. We know the Lord's church that were accused of cannibalism in one sense, by eating or partaking of the blood of Christ. We know of those that would make light of the sacrifice that our Savior made. We know of those that would ridicule the beliefs that we have, and that we allow the city of Rome to burn. And so Christians were persecuted for that fact as well, being falsely accused of things. The first case of this blood libel in continental Europe occurred in 1171 in Blois, France, and the Jews were burned at the stake as a result of that accusation. In our society today, there's a lot of accusations that are made, and people judge guilty before the testimonies are even made. And that's running quite relevant now, or rampant in our society. The Crusades, that was another changing thing during that time period. And all I'm going to say about that is that the Christian-Muslim fighting during the Crusades lasted to the end of the 11th century. And in that crusade, or in that fighting, it left the land devastated. Many innocents were destroyed because of this hatred for one group or the other, or the accusation against one group and two groups, that is, the Muslim and the Jews were slaughtered because of such. How many died from the Crusades? It's not really known. I don't know how you'd count them up. In some instances, I read that it was just really an occasion for somebody to go out there and make themselves rich from taking the spoils. The Black Death Plague. Most of us have heard about the plague and how all those events transpired. Well, once again, Jewish history was affected because the Jews were accused of doing this very thing. They were accused of spreading this plague throughout Europe and throughout the world. The fact that the 1/3 to 1/2 of the European population died from that bubonic plague. It came in, it came over to Europe, and the Jews were, a lot of them were among the dead, but they were accused of going around poisoning all the wells, which really makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, since they drank from the same wells. You know, people don't really change, do they? They get this idea in their head. They get their mindset that this happened, and so they'll just spread it like wildfire. And when all is said and done, come to find out it may not have really happened after all. Oh, we know the Black Death was there, but how did it come about? It wasn't through the poisoning of the wells. And despite the protests of Pope Clement VI, over 60 large and 150 small Jewish communities were destroyed over this in that region. When history goes back and they look at the plague and where it began, it really began in China. And it went from China on ships to these different areas, and it was carried by the rats that got on board those ships. And as those ships would pull into dock and those rats would get off the ships, and they go out and they contaminate and pollute the country round about them. It was estimated that there were some 25 million people that died within a 3-year period. 25 million people. I can't really grasp that number. How many people lived on the face of the earth at that day and time that 25 million people could be gone in 3 years and still have a population around there? And you couple that with all the other things that were going on, with the Crusades and with the destruction of different communities and societies because of who they were nationally speaking, or what their nationality, their original origin it was, whether it was a Jew or a Muslim or a Catholic, whatever it may have been. I can't imagine that many people dying at the hands of all these folks that were out there doing these things, and out of ignorance in so many instances. I look at society and I think about the influences that were going on at this point in time. I think about the major impacts and the major teachings that were going on. And as I went through this study and as I contemplated, well, how am I going to bring this about to kind of get our minds surrounding these things? How can we get these things together? And you start looking back, well, how were they able to carry on? If you were a Jew of that day and time, how would you be able to carry on? How would you be able to continue on practicing that belief that they had? Or if you were a Catholic, how would you carry on being a Catholic in that same sense? If you were a Muslim, how would you be able to carry on? How would you be able to maintain your sanity, if you will, knowing that at any moment, any one of these groups, any one of these conquerors could make up their mind, we're going to get rid of them? That would be a terrible society to live in. And yet, that's something that we need to remember because it could happen at the drop of a hat. We've got people that are trying to destroy us. People are trying to destroy other nations around us. We've got people that could care less whether you lived or died just because of the color of your face, of your skin, whether you got hair or no hair, got a good straight part. I mean, name the reason, that's all they need. And sometimes they don't even need a reason. Do we not learn anything from history? Do we not understand how important it is for us to go back and look at how frivolous some of these things were? And why these things came about and how these things enabled people to treat each other the same way, as nothing. We need to learn these lessons from history so that we don't go down that same trail, so that we don't go down that same track. I look at the major influential persons during this time period, and to try to pick out one or two or three, it was kind of difficult. I settled for a couple here. And the reason I settled for them is because of the influence that they had. The first one is Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac. He was also known as Rashi. And I don't know if that's the exact proper pronunciation, but it's close. Maybe Rashi. This fellow lived up, he was known as Rashi. He's born in France. He attended the academies of Mainz and Worms. He founded a school in 1070 which attracted many prominent pupils. His last years were grieved by the massacres committed at the onset of the First Crusade, in which he lost relatives and friends. And so he was one who suffered from the loss of those that he'd known down through the ages, or through his lifetime. Some of his own family members. You lose somebody in your family, sometimes you have this tendency, well, life's just not worth living. Oh, yes, it is. You still need to go on. You still need to provide guidance and show people that life is more important than any one life, and that we have so much more to live for in this life, to help encourage others, that as bad as society is around us, we don't have to stoop to their level. We don't have to give in to their tirades or to their influences. We can look at those that give good influences. Rashi, what he did was gave a good influence. He got this college, this school going. He commented on most, if not all, the books of the Bible. He dedicated his life to learning these books. Of course, we're not talking about the New Testament, of course. We're talking about the old Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the things that they learned, the things that they believed in. His main distinguishing characteristic is this commentary that was a compromise between literal interpretation and those based on ancient rabbinic midrashes, those that had already spoken before. And what he would do is he would take the Bible, he would look at those comments, and he would take the comments from others who had studied it before, and he would kind of bring those things together. He kind of meld those two books together to where they would have a means by which they could have another book to study from. One that they liked very well, that helped to guide them. Rashi centered his commentaries on a meticulous analysis of the language and of the text. It's almost like he wanted to make sure that when I do this, I'm going to write these things down precisely. I'm going to write them down. And one of the scholarly type reports that I read dealing with his commentary was they were picking out certain things about the way in which he did it. He didn't like to make it as a book that everybody couldn't understand. He wanted it so that everyone could understand it. He didn't have those big, long words like I like to use. I want simple things. I want it broke down to where I can easily understand it, where those I'm talking to can easily understand it as well. It does no good if we speak in words and nobody knows what we're saying. It's like speaking in tongues, after all. But what Rashi did when he was doing these things, he was doing it, and there were some senses in there that he wouldn't even comment on it. And the author that I was reading after, the comment that he made on it was, Rashi didn't spend time on areas where people could completely understand it. But when they went further into some of the other things, it would draw them back to that. And then they could say on their own, they studied, now we know what's going on here. He didn't just teaspoon feed them, in other words. He made them do a little studying their own selves, something I wish we could impart upon our brethren today. That they would take time out, that they would get their dictionary out and now rely strictly upon the preacher or the Bible school teacher, that they would get their concordances out. I love being able to do those searches on those electronics. Man, one of the first things I did on my outline, how many times you see the word remember or remembers? 198. I didn't go through and count every time. I trust that the search that I used was accurate. So it was around 198 times. Remember or remembrance. It's a great tool. But it's even better if you take that book in your hand and you read through that book and you learn those truths and you become familiar with those truths and you get those aha moments when, oh yeah, I remember that now. Remember, being reminded of those things. We notice also that at the highlight or the peak of Rashi's creative work was his commentary to the Babylonian Talmud. His commentary on the Talmud became the basis for all later literary activity in the field in France and Germany. A man who did his study, who prepared these books, who got this material ready and was then being used, as it is even yet today, one of the basic study guides to help understand the Word of God, or at least the Old Bible. Another fellow, I already mentioned his name, Maimonides, just a minute, I wrote it down, Moses Maimonides, also known as Rambam. Rambam's so much easier, isn't it? Has that little ring to it. He was and his most important work was the Mishneh Torah, which he finished in 1178. It was the first commentary to codify the halakha in a logical system. He came up with this system of principles and basics, this attempt to be able to help in guiding and to show the people, here's what we need to be looking at. Here's the guidelines by which we should live our lives after. And as he wrote these words, and again, this is that book that is still used widely by the Jewish culture today, as they use it for instructions, as they use it for guidance. He also wrote in 1185 through 1195 year period of time, he wrote this guide to the perplexed. I got to admit to you, if I were to try to study the Jewish law and the Jewish history, I too would be perplexed, because there are so many things in there that would absolutely throw me out of kilter. And the reason being is because some of the terms I just don't simply understand. I've not done this before. I've not looked at the history in this light before. But when you look at the minds of the people back in that day and time, and you think of all the persecutions, you think of all the pressures, you think of all the influences out there to just actually go away and hide somewhere so that you wouldn't lose your life. But yet here were these men that would make these books out for students, and as they would open these schools or these colleges, these places of study, that it would help them to learn these truths. Well, Rambam came up with this guide to the perplexed, and it was an attempt to reconcile Judaism with Aristotelism. You know, the philosopher Aristotle. Rambam was also a physician, by the way. He was also one that liked science. There's all sorts of things that he was involved in. You know, they had problems back in that day and time with people saying, well, God doesn't really exist. I didn't realize that. I thought all Jews knew that God existed. But apparently it was a problem. In the outline book, I've got the 13 things that he listed here. And as a summary to these things, these 13 theses, listen as I read through these 13. I want you to see if you notice one continuing theme throughout his principles here. The 13 principles of faith from the foundation for ancient Jewish belief. Principle number 1, I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be His name, is the Creator and guide for all created things. He alone made, makes, and will make all that is created. Principle number 2, I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, is a unity, and there is no union in any way like him. He alone is our God, who was, who is, and who is to be. Principle number 3, I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, is not a body, is not affected by the physical matter, and nothing whatsoever can compare to him or be compared with him. Principle number 4, I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, is the first and the last. Principle number 5, I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, to him alone is it fitting to make prayer, and to another prayer shall not be made. Principle number 6, I believe by complete faith that all the words of the prophets are true. Principle number 7, I believe by complete faith that the prophecy of Moses, our teacher, may peace rest upon him, was true, and that he was the father of all prophets that preceded him, as well as all that came after him. Principle number 8, I believe by complete faith that the whole Torah now found in our hands was the exact same one given to Moses, may peace rest upon him. I believe by complete faith that this is the Torah, and it shall not be changed, and it shall not be replaced with another from the Creator, blessed be his name. I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, knows every action done by each human being, as well as all their thoughts, as it was said, it is he that fashions their parts together, and he ponders all their deeds. Psalm 33 and verse 15. Principle number 11, I believe by complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, rewards all who keep his commandments and punishes all those who transgress his commands. Principle number 12, I believe by complete faith in the coming of the Messiah, and even though he tarry in waiting, in spite of that, I will still wait expectantly for him each day that he will come. Principle number 13, I believe by complete faith that there will be a resurrection of the dead at the time that will be pleasing before the Creator, blessed be his name, and the remembrance of him will be exalted forever and for all eternity. Now, with the exception of a couple, 3 of those in there, aren't they all things that we all believe? God the Creator, the only one. God who we pray to. Should be no mystery to us. I can see why the people of that day and time, when he wrote these books, or wrote these principles here, why they would have embraced them. The sad part about it is those few in there that the Messiah is going to come. The Messiah already came. That was their big problem to begin with. The fact that the Messiah had already come and they didn't recognize it, and they were ignoring these things, that was a real big problem. That's what really caused them to have more problems than they had really worked for. The fact that I believe by complete faith that this is the Torah, it shall not be changed, it shall not be replaced with another from the Creator, blessed be his name. The fact that the Torah is the Old Testament, that it hasn't changed, it's still the same today as it was back when it was first written. But there's others that have come along that move that law out of the way. It's the New Testament law, which Rambam wouldn't believe that because he didn't believe the Messiah had already come. What I'm getting at here is the fact that this faulty thinking that went on a part of all these Jewish leaders, that went on with the Christians, the quote-unquote Catholic Church, that went on with Mohammed and the Muslims, all that faulty thinking, all those deaths, all those crusades, if they'd only remembered what the Bible said, the Messiah is coming, and here's the sign of his coming. Here's what's going to take place. Out of all the study here, one of the things that kept sticking in my mind is actually my introductory remarks. The fact of the matter is that these things would not have happened if they'd have only abided by God's law. If they'd have only taken God's law, if they'd have listened to what the Messiah, our Savior Jesus Christ, would have said from the very get-go, if they would have recognized him as the Messiah, if they'd have listened on that day of Pentecost as Paul, or rather Peter, as he said, listen, the things that are going on now, remember now, Joel said these things before. This is what's happening. Listen. And they didn't listen. Well, 3,000 souls did that day. Stephen, history lesson for those Jewish leaders. You are stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart. You're just like your fathers before you. You're exactly like they were. You're doing exactly what you shouldn't be doing. What you need to be doing is listening to the Word and remembering. Look what God has done to us, bringing us all the way from the time of Egypt, all the way down to where the Messiah came from. And you just wouldn't listen. The words of our Savior, this do in remembrance of me. History is vital to our survival. We need to look at the history. We need to look at the Word of God because it is historical and yet so very, very much alive. We need to apply this lesson. We need to look at these histories of all these. Just think of all those people that would not have died or suffered because of the things that went on if they'd only believed the truth from the get-go. The Jewish law had no business being in existence then. Muslim or Islam had no business being in existence then. The Catholic Church had no right to be in existence then. They all had departed from what God said on the beginning. That's why those problems were there. That's why we have problems we have today. It's because we have failed to remember. We have failed to look at history and not learn the lessons from those that have done these things before and learn from them so that we don't do the same thing. No, there's nothing new under the sun. And we see that very, very clearly.